Thank you for joining us. We're anticipating more people to join us, but allow me to start talking about the project or doing a brief on the R2C project as we wait for the rest of the people to come before we hand it over to the panelists and the moderator for the session. So, of course, the R2C program is a research to commercialization program being implemented in partnership with Victoria Ventures and Kenya, and of course, funded by the RISA Fund. Of course, the idea or the motivation behind this is really to commercialize those innovations that are stuck up at libraries or in publications. And another motivation is because it has been done elsewhere, so why not do it in our country, in our continent? The objective is really to strengthen the researchers' capacity by taking them through several training, coaching, etc., as well as now strengthen the institutional technology transfer capacity using a similar model where we are having a training, coaching, webinars. And the program pillars are 5, where we have the TOT, that's a cascaded training aimed at building and strengthening institutions. We have an accelerator training. We have webinars, monthly webinars. We have so far done 12 webinars. We have one more to close the year. And of course, there's the element of partnerships and linkages as well as coaching. We have expanded, we started the program in Kenya and have expanded it to Ethiopia. We have done 3 cohorts so far, both for the accelerator program as well as the TOT. We have enabled or supported some of the researchers to commercialize or seek partnerships, as well as several coaching hours. So in terms of the cohort, who has been in our cohort in this year, we have had 30 innovators from these universities, both in Kenya and Ethiopia. And in terms of that, some of their milestones or some of the deliverables that they have been able to achieve. But before that, just to get a sense of which type of innovators we are working with, we have about 11 innovators in the agricultural sector. We have some in waste management and clean energy, so that's WASH. We have some in health, some in AI, food science, and water and sanitation, as well as leather. And then we have the TOTs, the training of trainer, the cascaded training. And this one have stemmed from various universities across the country and one university in Ethiopia. We have, just highlight a few, we have Kabarak, we also have Kenyatta University, we have Jaramogi, Karatina, Masai, just vast, well located in the different parts of the country. And then we have the monthly webinars, and we have had about 10, actually 12, and this is the second last one on corporate governance. And just some of the outputs some of the successes that we are very happy about is we have been able to really have 150 hours of coaching to both the accelerator program as well as the trainees. We have had actually all the training. We only have one training left, so we are 10 out of 11. Which is totaling to 288 hours of training, 27 TOTs, and even beyond the training of the TOTs, we still work with them in the institutions to offer the same research to commercialization program. And so far, we have targeted or trained over 400 participants in the different institutions. We have been able to secure funding together with the innovators to a tune of 20 million Kenyan shillings. We have 12 webinars, one more webinar to go. So allow me to just stop there and invite you for today's webinar session. And I'll allow Wilfred to introduce himself as well as the panelists for today's session. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you everyone for joining. So as Maureen said, today's topic is on corporate governance. So we'll be joined by 2 panelists who will give us some insights on corporate governance within the context of an SME or of a growing, small and growing business, as they call them. And with me, I have Dennis Maloya and Jeremy Riro. So I'll request perhaps to start with Dennis. You can turn on your video and mute and just give a quick introduction of yourself before we get started. Thanks.
Thank you, Wilfred. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dennis Maloya. I'm the CEO for Metier Metrics. Metier Metrics is a consulting firm. It's Kenyan-based, but obviously, as consulting would have it, it takes us everywhere: Ethiopia, Mozambique, Malawi, and Kenya, and obviously looking to expand into other areas. And we focus mainly on research management. So we conduct a fair bit of research, baseline surveys, endline surveys, and research translation, where we're trying to run a program like Victoria is running, engaging with innovators and helping them bring their products to the market. Aside from that, we provide services in business, so business support services, where we provide services to businesses that cannot afford to hire, for example, a full-time accountant, full-time project manager. And when they have jobs, we are able to assign some of our staff members to help out in these aspects. Aside from that, I'm also editor-in-chief of a business magazine. So we inspire professionals to venture into entrepreneurship. So basically, yes, that's how come we've ended up working with Victoria Ventures. So Victoria Ventures also engages us to take part in the training programs that it has been running in Kenya as well as Ethiopia. Thank you, Wilfred.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for the introduction. Jeremy, over to you for an introduction.
Thank you, Wilfred. My name is Jeremy Riro. I'm the managing partner at Fire Consults. We are a transaction advisory firm. Basically, that means we help organizations to access funding, whether it's corporate finance, debt equity, mergers and acquisitions, whether it's current, sustainable, and climate finance. We work in all those areas. Also, we work in public-private partnerships, structuring and fundraising for the same. So that's our core. But by extension, we support businesses in strategy, development, implementation, and operations streamlining. So they go hand in hand. Our other areas of interest are in international trade, international tax, where we support businesses that are working across borders to structure their cross-border businesses, and also to align on their tax matters when they are in different jurisdictions. So those are our core areas of our operations. We've been in the market for about 8 years now. We have an office in Nairobi and one in Kigali, but we work across the continent where business finds us or where we find business. So that's the brief about myself and where I work.
Thanks, Jeremy. And I didn't introduce myself fully, so my name is Wilfred Moria, and I am working with Victoria Ventures. And I'm glad to have you so partly involved in the R2C program in various aspects for Victoria Ventures. And Victoria Ventures essentially does the work of supporting entrepreneurs and enabling entrepreneurs access finance in a nutshell. So just to jump into it really quickly, we have about 45 minutes, so I want to maximize that. And I don't know who I should start with. Maybe I should start with Jeremy because you're the one who spoke last. What is corporate governance? Very simply, what is corporate governance? Why is it important for any business? And maybe you can even use your own corporate example to give an example of why it's important in your organization.
Well, yeah, I think when people hear about corporate governance, what comes to their mind most of the time is board, formation of a board and how the board then works. But broadly speaking, that's a narrow kind of perspective of what corporate governance is. In its breadth and depth, corporate governance covers basically all the stakeholders that relate to an organization or to a startup. And it's basically how do you manage those relationships so that the business succeeds. So there are different partners or stakeholders you'll have in a business. When you start out, if you are a researcher or if you are an innovator, you probably are alone or with a friend. So you are like very few of you. And then over time, you realize you're doing everything. You are the salesperson, you are the accountant, you are the product developer, and you're the person bearing the vision, and you're the person managing day-to-day activities and managing all relationships. But then over time, you realize you're building a team, you're having suppliers, you're having customers. You probably want to raise funding, so you're getting external capital coming into the company, and all these different stakeholders are interested in how the business runs, and they have a specific interest in the business, including the government. And in Kenya, infamously, so right now, KRA. So everyone has an interest in your business, and all these relationships have to be managed for the business to scale. It can get chaotic if you're not organized in a manner that you're able to manage all these relationships in the right way. And so corporate governance, the way I look at it, or how we approach it when even we're doing advisory to our clients, is the holistic view of how do I manage all these different stakeholders and make sure that their interests are met, and there's clear communication, there is proper collaboration, and everyone is happy and their interests are taken care of. And so corporate governance then becomes, how are you running, let's call it a machine that has inputs and outputs. How do you streamline how that machine, which is your startup, runs, and make sure that it can operate in a manner that is sustainable? And by sustainable, we mean in a manner that does not depend on one individual or a few individuals. It has structures and systems that are able to communicate with all the stakeholders involved. So I think I've taken a long route to try and explain a simple concept, but it's good that we set that foundation, that corporate governance is not basically about getting 3 famous people and forming a board and saying that now we have corporate governance. It's about systems, processes, and all stakeholders, and making sure that all stakeholders are well taken care of. Of course, the board then becomes the strategic organ at the top that helps in making sure all these other things work. So I'll stop at that and elaborate more as we continue.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. I think that's a very nice way of breaking it down, because as you said, many people think of just boards and processes and procedures and compliance, but I like how you put it in terms of corporate governance. It's about managing relationships, stakeholders, and interests, so that your business is able to operate in a sustainable way. So over to Dennis, perhaps. The question to you would be, how does good governance contribute to long-term success of a business? Perhaps in the process, you can make a comment on what bad governance is or what does good governance look like, and what does bad governance look like, and how does good governance contribute? Dennis.
Thank you for that. Well, effective corporate governance is crucial for any startup and for any business, really. So as Jeremy has said, we kind of usually focus on the big corporations and look at their boards and things they do, compliance issues and things like that. Then we forget to do it for small business. And so just to build on what Jeremy has said, it's also important for small businesses to bear this in mind as they continue to set up and grow their enterprises. And so a good corporate, or rather effective corporate governance, would entail an application of good principles. That includes good leadership principles, ethics, compliance with regulation, and things like that. So as we set up our enterprises, obviously we go to the e-citizen and enter in our details. And one of the things that comes up is memorandum of articles, if I'm not mistaken. So memorandum of articles kind of lays out some rules and regulations that an organization needs to follow. So in taking care of the stakeholders that Jeremy spoke about. So the government is interested in seeing organizations grow, enterprises grow, but also that they are conducting their business within the current legal framework. Okay, so I'll give an example. In terms of ethics, Nairobi City Council, wants businesses to operate in the best way. So to be clean with their refuse, to dispose it off properly, and so that we are not encouraging pollution and things like that. And so if you're setting up a business and you're generating a lot of waste, how are you going to take care of that? So there's regulation currently in place right now that allows you to take care of waste and dispose of it properly. So bad governance, an example of bad governance would be cutting corners in disposing of that waste. So, you just find an open space somewhere else in the middle of a residential area and dispose of your waste, endangering the lives of other stakeholders. So the public that's around there and other tourists and visitors that may be coming to the place. So good governance would say, all right, we need to dispose of this properly, even if it hurts the bottom line of the organization. So we're not just focused on profits, but we're also taking care of other stakeholders. Yeah, I'll stop at there as well.
Okay. Maybe just to elaborate on this, and I can invite also Dennis. So there are a few things again from what you've said. So that there's what you might call good governance and bad governance. At the same time, I've had words like effective, which means there might be ineffective corporate governance.
Yeah.
We could also talk perhaps of appropriate corporate governance in the sense of when is it appropriate perhaps to have a full board, maybe depending on the state of the company, the stage at which it's in. So I guess a number of us are running, different sizes of businesses, perhaps some that are in their first, second year, some like Jeremy's, which is maybe 8 years going on 10 years of existence. So what would either of you comment on in terms of, what level of governance is appropriate at what stage? And maybe even before we go there, maybe we should just list out what are the key elements, the basic ones of corporate governance for any company, be it a startup or a Safaricom. What are the basic elements of corporate governance? And then we can see, what makes sense to have when. I don't know, Dennis, do you want to go for it first?
Oh yeah, sure.
Or,
so yeah, I think that's a very important question, and I think SME operators need to understand those things. So the elements, I think I was beginning to talk about things like leadership. Okay, leadership. The board or the organization needs effective leadership in order to run its operations, because the reason we are in business is to solve problems and grow as a business. So we continue to make a contribution to the society in that sense, in terms of paying taxes, creating jobs, and solving problems. More importantly, solving problems. And so when you set up corporate governance aspect of your business, you want it to ensure that the business is taking the risks that it needs to take to make money, but at the same time take care of the interest of the other stakeholders. So in making your profits, in taking your risks and making profits, you don't want to harm the interest of the guys that are standing the other side. So it could be clients or suppliers to the business. So you are in a business and it's coming to a month end, and you need to make a decision whether to pay your supplier or pay your wages. And most of the times, what we tend to do as small business is to let the supplier, hold on, let me pay my wages, and then I'll take care of him later. And forgetting that the supplier also has the same obligations to his employees. So we are basically hurting him in the process. So what we're trying to say, I think, is that there needs to be a balance in terms of how you take risks for the business to make money, but also take care of the other stakeholders that are in the ecosystem that you're working with.
I like that, risk-taking, because I guess a lot of corporate governance is really constraining the behavior of for-profit enterprises, because perhaps left to themselves make money at all costs and at every cost. I think perhaps something that comes to mind in 2008, perhaps the great financial crisis that happened then, a lot of the harm that was done there was because of unrestrained risk-taking, essentially. Jeremy, do you have a comment on good, bad, effective, ineffective, appropriate, inappropriate governance?
Thanks, Wilfred and Dennis for that input. And I'll start on what you've just mentioned, the risk component. Risk management is one of the core things that governance helps to solve. And again, I like looking at things as as processes or as machines or as systems, and then see how do I interact with them when problem solving. And in this case, I'm assuming we are problem solving for corporate governance in organizations. And so it starts with who actually needs that corporate governance. And I think that's the next question you'll be addressing. And in short, you are setting up corporate governance because you want to scale, you want to grow, you want to expand your business. Otherwise, if you want to remain as an individual operating in your small business, then there isn't much to do. You just wake up, produce what you produce, sell to who you sell to, sleep, and that's continuous. But if you want to scale and you want to have growth to new markets, to new products, you're then going to engage a lot of these stakeholders like that we mentioned when we started. And so you need to have structures on how you're going to do that. So corporate governance really starts with having a long-term growth strategy. It doesn't even start with the systems in place. It starts with where do you want to be, how do you want to grow, which markets are you targeting, and then mapping out who are the different stakeholders, suppliers, customers, regulators, etc. that you're going to interact with. As you do that, you're also mapping what are the risks that as we pursue these opportunities in the market, as we grow in our long-term growth strategy, what are the risks that are involved along the way? What are the challenges that we might face? And how do we then deal with such? So it starts with that long-term thinking, and then you start now coming down to, okay, this vision, this dream is way bigger than myself. And I'm putting it this way because now we're talking to startups and SMEs. For large corporates, for them already, they are living the dream in some way or another. But for smaller businesses, they have the vision. And once you start realizing that the vision is bigger than yourself and the small team you have, then you need to start putting in place structures that will help you to build that stable, big business. So the long-term growth will advise how you structure your corporate governance. And most importantly now, when you start thinking about the governance issues within your organization, even before we talk about the board, there are some basic things that you'll have to think about that are very fundamental for all businesses. It doesn't matter which level you are at. So things like making sure that there is proper documentation and record keeping for everything, whether you are doing purchases, whether you are doing sales, whether you're having meetings internally, recording of anything that is related to the business. It helps you keep records properly, archive that, and someone else can come and actually make reference to whatever has been recorded and continue running the business. Remember, what you're having in mind is I'm building something that is beyond me. I don't want to be the only person who knows that we agreed we are going to expand to Rwanda, and this is how we are going to expand. I want it documented somewhere. In the event that I'm not there, other people can take it up and run with it. So record keeping, financial and financial meetings, etc. is a practice that is basic, but it starts strengthening your corporate governance. You are no longer a silo with all the information in your head. Other things that build up onto that is you start looking at who are the people that you are running this organization with, and what are the succession plans. Remember, we said it's a long-term growth strategy you are thinking about and building structures to support it. So you're thinking about a succession plan. Who, in the event that I'm not there, in the event that I'm incapacitated, what will happen to the business and how will it run? And so that takes you back to, you have to document everything about how the business runs. This now takes us to the conversation around policies, which most SMEs ignore a lot. They don't create those policies because they know their business and how they run things within their business. But you need to have them documented from finance, HR, how you deal with your compliance issues, how you deal with, I don't know, tech and ICT now that we're in a digital economy. All those things need to be documented and put in place. And besides the policies, you also need the standard operating procedures. If you're doing manufacturing, what are the processes that you follow? If you're a service company, what are the step-by-step processes that you follow in delivering value to your customers? All these things, we have not even touched the board yet, but all these things build up to good corporate governance structures. So when you start thinking about how you want your business to grow and how you want it to scale, you start realizing you cannot run it from your own head, and you have to have all these proper systems and processes put in place. The policies are there, the SOPs are there. You have the strategy already that is guiding you. You are keeping proper records. You are taking minutes in your meetings and recording them for reference so that you have continuity. You are developing a business continuity plan in the event of a catastrophe like COVID-19 or in the event of war like it's happening in Middle East and Ukraine. How would your business continue moving forward in those kind of circumstances? All those things, they might not sound directly like corporate governance, but putting structures and having them documented and well outlined and summarized for everyone within the organization to know is part of build up now to what we now call the corporate governance. And ultimately, you find that now you have to institute leadership, which Dennis talked about. Leadership is very key in terms of how is the organization governed. And I think at that point, you're looking at different stakeholders. I would look at it from three levels. So you have the employees or the management level and employees who are doing the day-to-day work, junior staff and the mid-level kind of stuff. And then you have the executives that are basically most of the time you find the CEO or and the C-suite kind of level guys. The founder will most of the time find themselves in that category. And then you have to create a layer on top, that is the board. So you find the execution is being done on a day-to-day basis by the employees and the staff and management. The executive is providing the supervision that is needed and guidance that is needed on a day-to-day basis, plus guide the execution of. And then the board comes at the top to help you in shaping that long-term goal, the strategy of the organization. And the beauty of having a board is obviously to provide oversight over the founders. Because if you're the founder, you have invested in a business and you are growing it, you have no one you are reporting to, and you might end up making decisions that are not sustainable for the business. So you need an oversight body that you report to that keeps you in check. People use mentors, coaches, etc. But now, as you start becoming a more organized organization, you transition from mentors and coaches to having a board of advisors, and then you can have a proper board of directors, and we can talk about that whole spectrum. So I'll stop at that again and allow you to interject.
I think that's actually a great place that you stopped at. And maybe just to recap some key things that I've had you mention is, sometimes corporate governance sounds like it's an over-the-head thing. It's what you should do when you are maybe sizable or significantly large in some way. But I like how you put it, that it's what you do from the very beginning. It's how you do your documentation. It's how you keep your records, whether they're financial or non-financial. And that makes it accessible to every kind of, whether you are a single person, either a sole proprietor or a single shareholder type of company, that is accessible to you in terms of how do you keep your documents, how do you do your record keeping. And then I also like how you tied it to your long-term growth mindset. So really, if you're building for the long term and you're building for growth, then corporate governance is something that is not at odds with that, but is an enabler to helping you create a stable business that will be there for the longer term. I also picked out some things around culture. So when you talk about ethics, integrity, accountability, those are things which are, again, accessible to businesses at any level. How you implement them might vary at different levels. But even as a single person company with your few employees, the kind of culture you maintain in terms of your business practices and your business relationships, that's also an element of corporate governance at that level. And then finally, also with regards to your processes and procedures, making sure that, things are not done ad hoc, but, even the basic things, if you're running a manufacturing company, you have some sort of documentation of process. If we're making I don't know, some kind of manufactured process, this is how things run on the factory floor, this is who is in charge of what, and things like that. And all those are things that are accessible to all of us at that level. But now that you've touched on the board of directors, perhaps we can go into that direction, because you can't really talk about corporate governance, and it's what everyone associates with corporate governance. Dennis, maybe you can take up on that and talk a little bit about, and maybe not just the board of directors, but perhaps we can start more broadly and then narrow down to the board of directors. So in terms of accountability, at which stage does the board of directors, so I've just started a company, should I have a board of directors immediately? If not, what are the alternatives? If I'm forming a board of directors, then How do I recruit them? Where do I find them? How do I remunerate them? So those kinds of things, and how do I grow that board? Then we can get into practices and so on. So Dennis, any comments on those aspects on formation of accountability systems, as I'd call it, not just the board of directors?
Accountability system is very important for any organization. We need to have accountability systems, but also systems and ways of ensuring that there's no overlap in terms of responsibilities, such that one individual has, the decision to makes the decision to acquire equipment for the organization, but also makes the approval, to make the payment for it. Yeah, so it's best to kind of separate these decisions, and these are the systems that Jeremy is referring to. If the system, the organization, the way you are setting it up, if it has these systems as you are growing the organization, then it is inbuilt into the system, such that if anyone joins the organization at any point, there are these structures in place that one can follow if they're trying to make decisions or the general day-to-day operations of the organization. And so the board really provides oversight for an organization like that. So they're providing, as Jeremy said, CEO has the vision, he's carrying the vision, he's very passionate about it. And sometimes there could be biasness in terms of how he perceives the market. So having a board in place of, experienced individuals, guys with very strong business acumen, market insights, but also from a diverse range of backgrounds, would help the CEO make the best decision, in that they'll offer a perspective, a very different perspective to what the CEO might be seeing. Okay, sometimes they will agree along, but other times, if you have a board of 3, 4, 5, or 10, they'll bring in their various skills and look at the problem very differently, and perhaps together with the CEO can formulate a hybrid, a hybrid decision or strategy to move forward. Okay, so it's best to, as you appoint your board members, it's best to find guys that have, experience in the industry that you currently are in, and they have a strong business acumen as well as market insights, amongst other things. Okay, and then you can also mix them up a little, not just guys from engineering section only, but you can also have other board members with different skills from other sectors or other parts of the industry. Okay, now, as we've said, the board then provides oversight to the running of the organization. So the CEO is basically accountable to the board. And it's best that we separate the two. Sometimes we have situations where the CEO is also chairman of the board. And that, brings into question a number of things, like conflict of interest. How do you take care of that? Will the CEO, as chairman of the board, will he be making the decision that needs to be made, or will he have a bias? So in setting up a board, it's best to have a chairman separate from the executive management of the organization that you're running or of your business. And that's just really separation of powers. And so that helps the board make the best decisions for the long-term sustainability of the business. Okay, in terms of remuneration, if you had money, it would be best to set up a board immediately, ASAP. But usually small businesses are starting, by bootstrapping and things like that. And so they don't have the money to set up the board. And, as we have said, the board is composed of, should be composed of very highly skilled individuals with, lots of experience. And so these guys don't come cheap. Okay, so you've got to be careful around these things. And in setting up that board, as a startup, you don't have the finances to do that. Maybe as a strategy, you could a startup could identify some good willing individuals that will be willing to sit on that board. The same way we can approach some individuals to have them as mentors, you'd be able to approach also somebody that would be willing to sit on the board. And, the minimum cost for that would be, sitting allowance when they come to sit, or at best, maybe just coffee when they are coming to sit and having this discussion. Now, they are not meeting every day. They're not meeting every week. They could be meeting maybe once a month, once a quarter, and things like that. So it would not be very expensive to provide coffee and biscuits during those meetings, with the understanding that, as you grow and if they stay on board, obviously, if you make more money, you'd be able to incentivize them properly. I think you had answered asked one more question, and I don't know if I've answered it.
I think so. Maybe though I can ask one follow-up on that in terms of remunerating board directors. How about use of equity? Have you seen, and how can because one thing also with boards, and two things you can comment on here. One is aligning interests or just getting them bought into your vision and being fully there. That's one. And then on the other side is board independence, because if the point is accountability, then you also don't want just your friends who you sit with around a cup of coffee and have a chat. So what would be a comment around board independence? And then the previous question was around use of equity to incentivize board members.
I don't know which one comes first, use of equity to incentivize. I think if they were to ask for equity, I think I would happily give some equity so that they have a bit of shareholding. And if they are holding shares, then I would also separate that from managing the organization as executive leadership. Okay, so if they are owning shares, that's where I would stop at. And if they become board members, but are not executives of the business, I think that's how I would approach it. The independence and why we'll be doing that is to provide that line between executives and the board. Yeah. So because if they're involved in the day-to-day running of the business or making decisions for the business, then they would be a little biased and they would not be able to question certain things, because relationships within the board can form. And then suddenly, you have a guy sitting on the board and he's also running the financials of the company. And, when we meet for golf, I'm telling him, all right, there's this problem at the office, please don't bring it up in the board. And that compromises the integrity of the board, and you don't want that. So you want a board that can provide oversight and, through its committees that it may have set up, provide all those functions that the board is supposed to provide for the long-term sustainability of the business, and ensuring that the business continues on the profitable path, whilst, maintaining its integrity, reputation, and things like that, so that investors can continue to flow in and grow the business.
Great, thanks. Maybe Jeremy, also a quick comment on use of equity, maybe now in specific terms. If I'm using equity to incentivize a board member, how much equity should I be giving up as a company to any board member?
Well, thanks, Wilfred. How much should you be giving up? It depends on how much value they're adding, literally. So when you're thinking about board members, now that you're talking about board members, I'll still take you back to where I started. It has to tie back to your long-term growth strategy. Yeah. So where do I want to go with this company, and what do I need to do to get there? Once you ask yourself those questions, and if you are ambitious enough, you realize that you cannot get to where you want to go alone, and you need a sounding board, you need people to keep you in check. And that's where the board of advisors comes in. And like I mentioned earlier, it can transition from mentors, coaches, and then they form a board of advisors, which is very different from a board of directors. Board of advisors, they don't have any legal implication on the advice they give you. You either take it or not. They are just like mentors, but you have constituted a group of 3-4 guys who kind of sit, regularly review your business and give you proper advice. But on the other hand, the board of directors, these are guys who are paid and they have actually legal obligation to make sure the company is headed towards the right direction. So differentiating those is very important, and knowing where to step in at what time. So when you're starting out, just get yourself a good mentor. Keep the mentor going, but then transition into a group of well-rounded people who can give you strategic advice, into a board of advisors. And then you can agree on how you compensate them. And then once they transition into board of directors, in most corporate organizations, you don't necessarily have to have equity in that company. In publicly listed companies, you must have a board of directors that is properly appointed, and they are remunerated, their salaries are made public, their financial statements. So that there's that process. Now, going back to this SMEs and the startups, where you are now transitioning from the mentors and coaches who are working in isolation to an organized board of advisors, that's what I would refer it to. At that level, there are different ways in which you can compensate these guys. Of course, like Dennis mentioned, these are people that you're bringing in because you want them to deliver value to your organization. Their expertise, their market linkages, and everything is what you are looking for. So before you even constitute that board of advisors, and before you even think of how you're going to compensate them, because compensation is a derivative of is a derivative of value. You must provide value, then you get compensated, either as a product or a service. That's the bottom line. So before we discuss that, then you have to look at what do I need as value from these guys when I'm constituting my board of advisors. What I want at this level as a startup or as an SME is growth. Growth is simple, revenues and profits. So how am I going my profits and revenues? And you'll excuse me, I love numbers. So we'll have to look at how many customers am I getting? What's the pricing of my product? Which markets am I getting into? The challenge, the biggest challenge for most businesses is not internal operations per se. That one you can get people to sort you out. It's getting that market and getting those recurrent customers coming. So whoever you're bringing in should be able to help you in that trajectory at this point. They can be very good lawyers, top lawyers in town, but business registration and compliance issues are pretty much typical. You can afford that from any lawyer who is not even the big names in the market. But you going out and getting into a new market, you want to go to Uganda, that requires some effort. It requires someone who knows how to navigate cross-border business. It requires someone who probably even understands the Rwandan market or has contacts that they can introduce you to. So that's the value you are looking for in these guys that you're bringing in your board. They're not just chaps that you report to and tell them, this year, this is what you have done, and this is where we are headed. And then you high five, have a drink and go. These are guys who are supposed to challenge you and help you think through, okay, you want to expand to this new market. I've been there before. I've tried expanding to these different markets, or I've even done an expansion in a different market. And these are the steps you take. These are the legal requirements. These are the tax issues you might face. When you're going into the new markets, these are the cultural shocks you might get, and this is how you navigate them. You want people who provide that value. And once you're able to know, I want someone who can help me in that direction, then you know you have a role for that person in your board. And then you go and look at probably your fundraising, in the fundraising phase, and you want to get investors onto your board, onto your company, basically. So at that point, what you're looking at is someone who can give you good insights and guidance in the investment process, in the fundraising processes, someone who has that experience in fundraising before. It could be another successful entrepreneur who has done it successfully. It could be an investor who is involved in that space, who was in that space, so that when they sit with you, they're actually guiding you with value. They have the connections, they have the knowledge, they understand the market, and that's the value they are bringing in. So once you identify the key things you need, if it's about human talent development, probably you are scaling very fast and you're having talent issues and how to manage them strategically. You need someone who have that expertise, who has been there before. Your business is growing, there's a lot of financial transactions going on, audit issues, different countries probably. Then you need someone who has some good understanding of finance also to help you in those areas. Now, once you profile them and the value they are bringing into the company, now we can start quantifying that value. And then we decide, how do I pay for that value? Do I pay for the hours of the meeting allowances when we're having our meetings? We quantify that. I pay you a good rate, and then you share your advice, and then you keep on that route. Or do I give you shares in my company? And remember, when you sell equity in your company, this person is going to stay there forever until they decide to sell those shares. Well, do you want them to stick forever, or are they important for a given season? You know, everyone comes for a season and for a reason, as they usually say. The board that you're having when you're a startup 2 years is not the same board that you're going to operate with when you're 5 years and going to 3, 4 more countries. You'll have to change that whole board at some point. And so do you want these guys to stick forever, or do you want to have a different arrangement of compensating them? So what we have seen with one of our clients that we have worked with in Rwanda is in terms of board composition, they are women-led company, and so they needed mentors or women who have been successful in business to sit in their board to guide them through, because we understand women-led businesses have their own unique challenges in terms of their leadership. Being a lady running a business is different from a man who is running a business. So they needed someone who can give them that advice. As a woman, how have you been able to navigate and succeed? So they brought one who has been very successful and sat in the board. And then they are still actually fundraising for successive rounds. They were in the fundraising phase, and they needed someone who could help them and guide them through as they make those funding decisions at the board level to think through how that one happens. And so they got someone who is also, one, she's an angel investor, two, she's an investment professional, and three, she has wide reach to different investors, both locally and across different parts of the world. And so they were able to get her also onto their board. Now, that was a very conscious step where you were thinking of, what do I want? How unique is my business? And who do I want to sit in my board? In terms of the compensation, now for these guys, what they ended up doing is a revenue share kind of model for the period that you are a board member. So you get, I think it was 1% or 2%, I don't know, I don't remember the exact number, of the revenues that we make for the period that you have been appointed as a board member. Now, here there is aligned interest. Remember, you are bringing in this board so that they help you to grow, nothing else. We want your inputs should help me grow and grow these revenues and profits. So if I'm able to tie my compensation to you helping me grow, then you're even more motivated to think wider, open up more opportunities. Because, you know, if I'm making revenues, let's say $100,000 per year, and you're getting 1%, that's just $1,000. If you're able to help me scale to $1 million, then I'm making 10,000 US dollars in revenues. And so it is in my best interest to advise you in the best way possible. If I have a contact that can help you scale, if I have a network in another country where you want to expand, I'll make that introduction without thinking very fast, because I know it ties directly to my compensation. So that's another way of thinking about it. And the beauty about it is it limits you to the period when you are a board member, after which I can easily change my board to another board over time as the company evolves, and we are not tied like forever until death do us part. I'll stop at that. Fantastic. And sorry for speaking for
Fantastic.
too long.
I think again, touched on a number of things, and one of the critical relationships. When we started out, we talked about corporate governance being partly about managing relationships, interests, and stakeholders in the business. And one of the stakeholders I wanted us to touch on is how your corporate governance touches on your relationships with potential investors and funders. And I think that the use of that example was great. There was a question on the chat here which also touched on this. This is from Odak, and he says, I quote, "I got a question from an investor who asked me about co-financing in regard to risk management, which I think touches on governance, but more or less if I can give guarantee on my journey to scale up. How should I look at this, and how should I address this question?" So I'm supposing there are two parts to this. One is we can take it as how you can use corporate governance as a means to de-risk your company in the fundraising process, or to at least minimize the perception of risk from investors. And I can ask perhaps Dennis to have a comment on that. The other side of the question is guaranteeing journey to scale up. I don't know, maybe Jerry can say something about this afterwards, after Dennis has had a chance, but I'm not sure whether anyone can guarantee scale up for any business. But maybe Dennis first, you can just make a comment about how do you use corporate governance to de-risk, or what's the role of good corporate governance and demonstrating these elements that we've been talking about with regards to fundraising and managing your relationships with potential investors and future investors.
Just a minute, Wilfred, before Dennis comes in. Can the person who has the question rephrase it verbally? I feel I'm missing the context. If they should be able to explain it, probably could be very specific on how we respond to it. If they're able to.
Maybe I can ask. Okay, yeah, he's been given Odak, you've been given access, so please go ahead. Mr. Odak, you can ask the question. Go ahead, if you're able to. Okay, so maybe Dennis, you can just, maybe Odak, as you get sorted, maybe Dennis, you can make a quick comment about use of corporate governance to manage your investor relations as we wait for Odak, and then after that I'll give him a chance. Just a quick comment on that.
Great. So effective, as we've been pointing out throughout, effective corporate governance ensures that you're doing the right things. So you're transparent, you're accountable, the board is independent, so there's no conflict of interest in how you're managing your business. And so in terms of investors, when investors are looking into a business and are looking to invest, they are looking at how the organization is run. So they're also looking at these things. Is there transparency within the organization? Will my investment be safe with this organization? And how will you know if your investment will be safe? By really looking at the track record of that business. So, the business has been there for a few years or months. You can look back and see how they've been handling issues, how they've been managing their finances, how they've been making their decisions, and how quickly they're growing and what's hindering that growth or what's facilitating that growth. So looking at that, an investor might, looking at those records from the organization, an investor would look at that and be encouraged to make the right decision for the business, whether to invest in it or not to invest in it. And more importantly, to ensure that the investment is safe if it's put into that organization. That was a quick one.
Odak, are you able to now ask the question so that Jeremy perhaps can answer? As we also come to a close, I see we have just a few minutes left, so we can take Odak's question and then maybe wrap up.
Yeah, I've seen the clarification that she has put there, that
Okay.
what I meant with
Okay.
guarantees, the investors need assurance of how financial risk could be mitigated by good governance. I think, Odak, you have the answer. Yeah, good governance is going to mitigate financial risk, but the question probably is how. So when I'm putting my money in your business, basically I'm betting on a third party. If it was my own business, I could calculate my own risk, put in the money, operate the business, and see how my money comes back. Now I'm giving it to you, a third party, with the hope that I'm giving you $1 million US, and in 3 years I'm able to get $4 million US out of that business. Then you have to show me and prove to me that you are able to, first of all, get the money, invest it, get customers who are paying, increase your revenues, increase your market share, and increase your revenues to 4 times what they are right now, so that the valuation also grows 4 times in 3 years' time when I want to get out of the company with my 4 million. Now, you can prove that, but now for me to have the comfort, because you're not my relative, and even if you were, this is money, for me to have the comfort that I'm going to get that money come out, you have to show me what are the systems you have put in place to make sure that money is not being lost. You are first of all, government won't come and shut you down. So compliance issues, they have to be there. That there won't be fraud within the company to steal money. So ethical issues about internal checks and controls. I want to see that they are there, that like Dennis mentioned, you are not the same person who authorizes, procures, and everything of that sort. I want to make sure that you are not the sole person who makes decisions and you go wherever you dream at night and you wake up in the morning and execute. So I want to see what's the leadership composition and the independence again of the board that is working with you. These are all structures that you put in place that will give me a third party comfort that if I give you money will be secure. I'm relying on these systems and structures that are detached from you as an individual, and making sure that you work collaboratively with other people to make sure that I'm mitigating my risk. If I was to just give you money as an individual, then the risk of you running away with it is higher, or you misusing the funds. But when there are people who are keeping you on check, who are asking the right questions, who are guiding you along the way, then I get the comfort that besides me and my team that will be coming frequently to check on how the business is doing, there are other parties that are interested in the success of the business. And that kind of a de-risking component there, when you have proper structures, proper records, like we mentioned, and you have a board that is competent and independent that is working with you, that gives comfort to a lot of investors. And that is to say, due diligence, when investors are doing due diligence, corporate governance is one of the key things that they look at. So if you are looking to fundraise, you better start thinking about putting together proper corporate governance structures in place, because that's one of the areas that they'll focus on. And their lawyers, the buy-side lawyers, the lawyers who advise the investors, will not budge until they make sure everything is up to standard. So you have to think about that. And obviously, investors will sometimes get into the board. They would want to have a seat on the board so that they can also influence or be able to see how the business is being run going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I think that really touches on it. And just that last comment, you know, one is because the investor is bringing in money. I mean, like you said, Mr. Odak, it's directly tied. They want to be sure that their money is being safeguarded. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that the company is operating in a certain way and within certain boundaries and with certain oversight and with certain accountability. So many times you'll find, especially for a startup that has never had a board before, one of the conditions precedent in the funding agreement was you have to form a board. And one of the other, assuming that the investment is in form of equity from the investor, they will want a seat on the board. Or even if it's not equity, they might not ask for a seat on the board, but they might ask as part of their information rights that you send them your board minutes and things like that, just to have the comfort that things are being done with some level of oversight and accountability. So with that, I think we are coming to the close, and we've just passed by a minute, but I'll just ask maybe Dennis one sentence in summary, Jeremy one sentence in summary, and then I will also wrap it up. So Dennis, one sentence summary of the discussion or takeaway.
Takeaway. Thank you very much. My takeaway, or rather my parting shot, let me call it a parting shot, is that you're setting up a board so that it can help your business grow. So you're not setting up a board just for the sake of status and things like that. You want a board that's going to help you make provide oversight, ensure that you have a good strategy moving forward. Yeah, so you want them to provide value to organization in that sense. And the end goal really is to grow to become something bigger than that, bigger than we can probably see in the short term. Because what happens mostly when we're starting off, we don't kind of look far ahead to say, all right, this is where I'm starting now, and in 10 or 15 or 20 years, I'd like my company to be listed on the Nairobi Stock Exchange. No, but if you're looking that far, then you are, from the word go, you're already setting up systems and processes within your business that can inspire confidence in the investors, and board members, as well as other stakeholders, that this is a good, reputable firm that is solving a problem that we can invest in and can also probably give back to the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Thank you. So I'll pick up from where Dennis has left in terms of it's about the long-term growth of your business. So as you think about corporate governance is, how will this organization run in the event that I'm not there and I'm handing it over to a third party to run it? What would they need to run it? And how would I get comfort that is being run well? What are the systems I need to put in place? What are the structures I need? And what kind of people would I want it to have? Either at the board level, executive level, management level. Those are the things that you need to think of when you're thinking about governance. And just maybe to list a few, one of them is compliance and legal considerations. You don't want to be shut tomorrow by government. You want to think about your risk management. What are the risk exposures that the business has, and how do we plan to go around them and mitigate them? how are we doing our financial management, from record keeping of transactions to reporting, audits, everything. Transparency and accountability. When the investors or my other stakeholders want information, are they able to access it? Is it in the right format? Is it detailed enough? Are they happy that with the information that you're having? Ethical standards, again, that's a very important thing. Are we running our organization ethically? And what have we put in place to make sure that no one goes beyond outside the boundaries that we have set? Most important, I believe it's a program for researchers, intellectual property protection, your IP. Do you have policies that govern that, and how have you planned around it? So think about all those things and work on them on a day-to-day basis, even before you start thinking of creating a board. The board is good, but without those other things, they'll just be there for a show and they won't be helpful. One last thing, I've seen entrepreneurs who fall into this trap of having big names on their websites as board members. I mean, you can have President Ruto as your board member because he's your friend, but how often will you meet him? And how often will he sit down to look at your numbers and help you in your day-to-day operations? So also be reasonable when you're looking for board of advisors or directors. These should be people who are available. Much as they are busy, they should be available to actually support you. So much as we're looking at experienced people, like Danny said, that's actually a basic rule. They must be experienced and have good networks. But again, don't overshoot it. Just because your uncle is a governor, he's too busy governing the county. Don't just put him there for the sake of it. Because when it comes to due diligence from investors, when you're supporting them, these are some of the things that they raise, like how useful is this person in this board? Think about that. Thank you.
Great. Hey, thanks, Jeremy. And for me, I'd just say in one sentence, start with the end in mind. If you're building to last, if you're building for growth, then corporate governance is from the word go. How you do it changes over time, but it's something which you have to have, from as basic as how do you keep your documents and your bookkeeping and those very basic practices. And then as you go along, how do you now compound that with additional measures to make sure that your business is balanced, there's oversight, there's accountability, and all that. And it's a matter of culture. So the earlier you start it, the earlier you build that culture in, the better it'll be for you even later on when you don't have to wake up one day in the morning and, oh, now I have to have a board because now I'm thinking of doing X, Y, Z, or now an investor has come. It helps if the investor sees that you've had some basics of corporate governance from the word go, even if you're fundraising 3 years down the line. Don't just start then. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who has managed to join this afternoon. We have short by a few minutes, but I'm grateful. I think we've had a very good discussion. And most importantly, I think we have managed to bring the discussion to a level that is accessible to everyone at whatever stage of business operation. So thank you so much, Dennis and Jeremy. And we hope to see you again for the next session we will have. And we'll end it here. Good day, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you and bye.